Youth empowerment and well-being is our focus at LPTV this morning. So we're going to start by handing the mic over to our first guest, Raven Frias, who is a game changer from the Philippines and who is a member of the very first LearningPlanet Youth Council when the council was created back in 2021. Today, Raven is doing her Master's in Learning Science at the LearningPlanet Institute, where she is also a member of the Scientific Advisory Board. Raven, welcome to LPTV. Can you share with us your journey these past years and what this has meant to you?
Absolutely, Kristen. So last year, I was just a college student in the University of the Philippines, and I was leading a nonprofit organization where we were teaching children, parents, and also elderly about topics such as mental health, disaster preparedness, nutrition, among many other things. And after that, I saw a call for change makers from all over the world. So I signed up, I applied, and I got in. And it was the first ever LearningPlanet Youth Council where I got the chance to interact with young leaders from all over the world, exchange ideas, collaborate on projects, and I was also exposed to the wide range of organizations, startups, nonprofits, changing the game from wherever they are. So after that, I joined institutions such as Weekend Access, Youth by Youth, and now I'm working with Curriculum for Life, where we are co-creating a curriculum that is open access, life skills based, and will be free to all teachers from all over the world. So in the future, what I hope to do is to continue voicing the opinions of young people, and also in the Strategic Advisory Board to continue making a change in different aspects of well-being, such as mental health, nutrition, environment, among many other things. So what I hope to do is to continue inspiring young people from all over the world to involve themselves in conversations about their future.
Raven, thank you so much for sharing your story and demonstrating your path to becoming an active and engaged education game changer. What advice would you give to anyone who's inspired by what you've shared, your story, and is wondering how to get started?
Oh, that's a really great question. So my advice to those who want to start their journey in game changing is to continue seeking spaces that are unfamiliar and continue challenging things, questioning things, and continue collaborating on solutions to the problems that we are facing today. And I feel like it's really a great opportunity to learn, unlearn, and relearn things when you expose yourselves to environments where your ideas are being challenged. So yeah, that's my hope for the future, is for us to continue collaborating towards a better future for the planet.
Raven, that's a wonderful message to share with our audience at LPTV here this morning. Thank you very much. And we can share, in fact, with the audience how to apply to become a Youth Fellow. You're a Youth Council member, but we also have the Youth Fellows here at the Learning Planet. You can find more information about the Learning Planet's Youth Circle and how to become a Youth Fellow on our website. So do check that out and be inspired by Raven and many of the other young people here. Raven, it's been great having you with us here in the studio in Paris, and I know that you are participating in many events throughout the festival, including here again on LPTV in just a few minutes. So we'll see you again very soon. Thank you. Now, let's look at the results of our Learning Planet survey, as we've asked you to tell us what you are most passionate to learn about yourself. Is it yourself, others, our environment, or all of the above? I can tell you I've just checked the poll results, and thank you to everyone who has voted. I can see that actually 13% of you are very concerned about learning to take care of yourself, but an overwhelming 78% of you are saying that you want to take care of all of the above. That's yourself, the others around you, and our planet. And we've got all of those topics covered here today on LPTV. We're not just covering those topics, we're covering the globe as our guests are in our studio here in Paris, and we're now going to New Zealand for a special message from the Right Honourable Helen Clark. She's the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, the former administrator of the UNDP, and also the board chair for the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health. Over now to New Zealand and the Right Honourable Helen Clark for her special message on youth empowerment.
Greetings to everyone gathered for the LearningPlanet Festival. I'm so pleased to be speaking with you on the International Day of Education, 24 January, and to be speaking in this session focused on youth wellbeing and mental health. I'm speaking as board chair of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, PMNCH for short. We advocate with and for young people and their well-being. As we all know, there are around 1.8 billion adolescents and youth in our world today, and it matters to all of us that this generation can thrive. For that to happen, the needs of adolescents and youth have to be prioritised, and their leadership, voices and experiences must be acknowledged and included. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, adolescents and youth faced multiple and interlinked challenges to their well-being. Challenges including social injustice and inequalities, such as those related to gender, gender identity and inclusion, such as insufficient social protection, inadequate mental health services, poor sexual and reproductive health, and an inability to exercise rights, which can result in unintended pregnancies and in contracting HIV. Among a number of adolescents and youth, we've also seen a crisis of connection to family, community and society, with increasing numbers living on the streets and or dropping out of school. Globally, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experiences a mental disorder. That accounts for 13% of the global burden of disease in that age group. Depression, anxiety, and behavioural disorders are among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 19-year-olds. As of 2018, 258 million children and youth were out of school, a number which increased with the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in countries where learning outcomes were already low and there were high dropout rates. Globally, around 1/5 of young people aged 15 to 24 are not in a job, in education, or in training. Young people are also facing the threat of climate change. Children and young people who have contributed the least to greenhouse gas emissions will bear the biggest consequences, together with future generations. The WHO, UNICEF, Lancet Commission on Child Health and Wellbeing found that there is no single country which provides all the conditions needed to support children to live healthy lives today or provide an environment fit for their future. We see new evidence on this in the PMNCH and British Medical Journal collection on adolescent wellbeing. It builds on the definition and conceptual framework for adolescent wellbeing, which was developed by PMNCH and by the United Nations H6, Health 6 Technical Working Group on Adolescent Wellbeing. That tells us that climate change threatens all the 5 identified domains of adolescent wellbeing. good health and optimum nutrition, connectedness, positive values and contributions to society, safety and supportive environments, learning, education and employability, and agency and resilience. Adolescents experience significant increases in rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression following a climate-related disaster. These outcomes are major risk factors for suicide, the third leading cause of death in older adolescents aged 15 to 19. In a recent global survey of 10,000 young people aged 16 to 25 across 10 countries, around 60% were extremely worried about climate change, and more than 75% stated that because of climate change, they were finding the future frightening. Yet, despite all this data, young people's needs are still not being properly integrated into climate policies. Only around a third of the 103 countries which have submitted new or revised nationally determined contributions under the climate change agreement processes have made those contributions youth sensitive. Under 19% of those nationally determined contributions consider children and young people as rights holders, meaning that only around 1 in 5 of those NDCs include references to children's rights or to intergenerational justice and equity in a meaningful way. For example, as part of a vision, a cross-cutting approach, element or pillar on which the nationally determined contribution is built. Only 27% of disaster risk reduction commitments are found to be youth sensitive. In addition, between 2003 and 2015, development assistance for adolescent health accounted for only 1.6% of total development assistance for health, despite a third of the total global burden of disease being estimated to have its roots in adolescence. So we need more policies focusing on improving adolescent and youth well-being, funding and programs which are youth-targeted and gender-sensitive. All this is why PMNCH, which is the world's largest alliance for women's, children's and adolescents' health, has launched the 1.8 billion Young People for Change campaign, a global youth-led campaign to mobilise more and better action for adolescent well-being, including in relation to young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights, all in the context of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and the many conflicts affecting our world. Our campaign culminates in the Global Forum for Adolescence in October this year. At the very centre of the campaign will be the voices of young people themselves, young people speaking for their own health and well-being, their empowerment and resilience, their education and skills, and their connection with people and planet. An agenda for action from all this will be developed by PMNCH based on the real-time input from hundreds of thousands of young people through the What Young People Want chatbot system. That chatbot is now live on the 1.8.org website. And our message to adolescents and youth is come on in and join the campaign. Share your voice using that chatbot. The agenda for action to be developed will guide political advocacy efforts, and it will target windows of political opportunity like the UN Sustainable Development Goals Summit in September this year and the G20 Summit also later in the year. This bottom-up data collection allows young people to share their priorities. In turn, this creates a powerful and contextualized advocacy tool, strengthening young people and adolescents in their own advocacy for resources, accountability, and attention for the challenges they face in their countries, including getting access to quality education and learning opportunities. We believe young people know what they need, and as partners, we must support their vision. As I said, there are 1.8 billion young people in our world today. So let's all support this important and timely campaign, 1.8 billion, to hold governments accountable, increase policies, financing and services for adolescent and youth well-being, and ensure a healthy and sustainable future for this generation and for generations to come. The Learning Planet Festival is a unique opportunity, and I echo its message to learn to take care of oneself, of others, and of our planet. Youth voices matter. Let us ensure that they are heard loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you for that special message, Helen Clark, and for underlining the importance of hearing and acting on what youth want. It's a pleasure to have had Helen Clark with us as part of the festival this year and to be able to share her message via our community and via LPTV. What youth wants is the focus of another of our speakers later this morning. So stay tuned to hear Nusrat Durrani, the founder of MTV World. Right now, we're handing the mic from a former Prime Minister back into the hands of youth to continue our morning dedicated to youth empowerment and well-being. Our next guest is a full-time and lifelong changemaker who founded her first organization, Bye Bye Plastic Bags, at the age of just 12 years old. In 2019, she traveled the globe as part of Floor Vass's documentary film, Bigger Than Us, visiting Greece, Brazil, and Uganda, and meeting many other young changemakers like her that are dedicated to creating a better world. Here to tell us more about her work, including her latest project, Youthtopia, please welcome Melati Wijsen. Melati, welcome, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. It's a huge honor to be here at the Learning Planet Festival. I'm so honored to be tuning in tonight, or this morning actually, from London, where I'm currently based for now. But I usually live in Bali, and I'll tell you one thing, I prefer the weather and the warm sunshine in Bali versus here. I apologize in advance for the cold that you can hear coming to me. But all in all, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm so excited to share the story of my last 10 years, half of my life, frontline creating change, starting at age 12 and today as a 22-year-old full-time change maker. I'm just going to say that I do hear myself, so I hope there's not a double audio happening. Otherwise, I will keep going, but I hope everything is okay on the listener's end. I wanted to start off by asking everybody watching to sit up straight, roll your shoulders back on the count of 3. I'd like you to join me in taking a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3. Take a deep breath in and out. And another deep breath in and out. I like to do this exercise because it's a nice grounding session for me personally, but secondly, because it is a nice reminder for all of us that every second breath we breathe comes from the ocean. So it really doesn't matter whether I'm here in London or back home in Bali. The ocean has always been a big reason of why I do what I do, to protect the oceans from plastic pollution. Now, as I mentioned, it's now been half of my life, and what I wanted to share in today's session of youth empowerment and well-being is some of the things that I have learned while creating change, in hopes that it helps all of you, other young people who want to get started or want to keep going, creating change. Lesson number 1 was team. You cannot do it by yourself. No matter how good of an idea, no matter how good of a leader, you need to have that team of like-minded people around you. So find your allies, find the people who support you in your community, either your teachers, your friends, Me, it started with my best friend, my sister. And from there, we grew into one of Bali's largest youth-led organizations. Second lesson, think creatively, think outside the box. Now, us Gen Z have that as a unique aspect in our DNA. We know we can't solve the problem with the same thinking that created it. So be different, think outside the box. And last but not least, always go back to your why. Why are you doing this? If you're doing things for the right reason and from a place of pure intention, no ego, no money driven intention, no politics or ego or greed, then you will see that more people gravitate to the message. And this is what 12-year-old Melati and her little sister Isabel at 10 years old could build because it was coming from no other place than a place of authenticity. For me, my why is going back to the breath, going back to the importance of the ocean, and reminding myself of why it's so important to take care of our planet. Today, my mission is to make sure that each and every single one young person feels like they have access to the tools, to the resources, skills they need to create change. And I'm creating Youthtopia because I hope that when I was 12 years old and I started my journey, I wish I would have had a community or a network or a place to learn from other young people my age. And so that's really where my new mission with Youthtopia is to build that number one go-to learning platform where young people can learn from each other how to create change. So I invite all of you to come and join Youthtopia, learn over there. But for now, enjoy the conversation and many lessons to come in the panel discussion here at LearningPlanet. Thank you so much for having me. And remember, as we heard from the last speech, us kids only 25% of the world's population, but we are 100% of the future. And that future starts today, and it starts with you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Melati, for joining us at the festival today and for the many projects and actions you've launched for our planet. It's great for us to be able to showcase your work here on LPTV and throughout the next 5 days at the festival. Films like the one Melati featured in, Bigger Than Us, are a powerful way to share and highlight the global changemaker stories. And our next guest knows a lot about this subject, as Nusrat Durrani is the founder of MTV World and a filmmaker working across culture, media, technology, and capturing stories from around our globe. I got to sit down with Nusrat and ask him, how do we better understand what global youth want and how youth can use media and film to help convey their needs? Let's hear what Nusrat had to say. Nusrat Durrani, thank you for joining us at the Learning Planet Festival. Your life's work has been dedicated to global media and music. You founded MTV World in 2005 and then went on to create MTV's first live music series, The Music Experiment, and then the award-winning Rebel Music documentary series. Now, you've been tuned in and channeling what youth want for almost 2 decades. How has listening to youth changed your outlook and your actions?
It's a pleasure to be here, Kristen, first of all, on this very important platform. I've spent I would say about 25 years trying to super serve youth. And it's ironic because in those 25 years, I have aged. But I think the fundamental learning that I've gained is that we really need to be focused on the future. And the future is, guess what? It's youth. And, from that came the need for sort of almost a radical empathy for the young. And what that means is it's not just acknowledging that young people are the future, but really deeply understanding their desires, their challenges, their opportunities, and really focusing all my work with that in mind. So I would say that, fundamentally it's empathy for the young of the world that I've gained in these many years.
Okay, so thinking about then this radical empathy, based on your experience and practicing this, how can we better listen and act on what global youth want? How can we better have that radical empathy that we need?
Well, I think the first few things we need to understand is that the youth is not a monolith. I mean, the word youth is being thrown around everywhere, very easily. But the youth of the world are incredibly diverse. I think there's something like between 1.5 to 1.8 billion young people, depending on the age group you take. And almost 80 to 90% of these young people are actually in the developing markets. And that would be Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, et cetera. And the realities of youth, say a country like Niger in Africa, which is actually the youngest nation on earth by median age, are very, very different from somebody who's 17 or 18 in the USA. So I think the first thing to understand is that youth are incredibly diverse, and there is no one size fits all approach to partnering with them or to understanding what they want. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that there is a need for intergenerational partnership. And what that means is that we cannot simply say, all right, let's support you. Let's say, let's listen to what they're saying. I think they need that. I think the young of the world need that very much. But I also think they need our wisdom and our resources and our support in, harnessing the opportunities they have and also dealing with the very significant challenges that we have posed for them.
Nusrat, the creative arts, including music and film, are powerful mediums for messaging across societies and generations. What advice would you give to youth wanting to use film and media to message across countries, continents, and to raise their voices?
What I would say is to the young is that you're already doing incredible work, but be bold. Use every single device that you might have, whether it is your opportunity to vote somebody out of power or to protest or to make a short film that goes viral or to start a blog or to be on TikTok or any of the, or leverage the metaverse. Be in the face of the people that need to change. And, you are doing already phenomenal work in this regard. But I think sometimes the fatigue sets in. Sometimes the hostility or the indifference of the powers that be actually are fatiguing and tiring. Don't worry about that. Get up and fight, because you would be surprised how many people in power actually want to give you voice and want to support you.
All right. Anything else that you want to record as a short message, or any other questions that through this discussion you've thought, that's what I want to include that in what I say?
Is the one thing I would say is that, and directly address the youth of the world, is that you inspire me. I wake up every night thinking about things, the very, very, very bold, the very innovative things that the young are doing around the world. I wake up and I think of what is happening in Iran. I wake up and think about what is happening in other parts of the world. So the young are our future. They are the flowers of the future. And you inspire me, and you give me hope, and you give me optimism.
Nusrat, Durrani, thank you. I hope that your message is also going to inspire and empower youth around the globe, but also all of us adults to have that radical empathy that you talked about and listen, hear, and deliver on youth's needs. Thank you so much for joining the Learning Planet Festival.
Thank you, Kristen.
You're watching LPTV, and we're broadcasting live from the Learning Planet Festival, where this morning's programs are dedicated to youth empowerment and well-being. And we hope that our guests are helping you to feel empowered and to act on the causes that are important to you. We want to hear from you on how you act on the issues that you care most about. So grab your phones and flash the QR code on screen next to the live stream and tell us what you do. What action do you take to express yourself? Perhaps you protest in public, or you create art and content, as Nusrat Durrani has just encouraged us all to do. Perhaps you get involved in politics, or you choose to be active in your local community. When you've answered that question, check out the other questions in our survey so that you can share with us your thoughts and tell us what you're thinking. I'll share your feedback with you right after our next session. Speaking of which, our next session brings us together with youth and youth-focused organizations such as Save the Children and Children in All Policies to celebrate their ideas, the approaches and methods they use, and their actions in their local communities. I'm going to hand the mic over now to Edward Stevenette, Project Manager at the LearningPlanet Alliance, to introduce his guests and to continue to explore youth empowerment and well-being at the festival. Ed, welcome to LPTV, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to moderate this during youth empowerment and well-being. So for us at Learning, co-construct and empowering them a really core sense for building tomorrow. Into a bit of a, I think that's better. There we go. So we've just heard from Helen, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, shared that 7 to 19-year-olds experience mental disorder globally. However, for us, we want to use the discussion here towards the solution as well. We want to celebrate the years for coping in the world, where 1.2 billion adults and youth get can really flourish and have the need to shape the world we see today. This is a really cool work with at LearningPlanet Alliance. We discovered throughout the Christmas said through interviews, notably youth can make up those communities. So we're delighted to introduce 2 of them today as speakers. Firstly, Raven from the Philippines. She has dedicated her life and volunteer activities to promoting well-being, rights, and education of Filipino children and families. She now represents the sector in global alliances, advisory groups, and conferences. And really her activities include children's rights, youth empowerment, and progressive education. We're also joined by Tim Agalo from India, who's leading for the Wijsen organization and is also part of the LearningPlanet Youth Council, looking at supporting globally and connecting as game changers. Lastly, we're joined by global leaders in youth wellbeing, research, and activist advocacy. So really glad to be joined by Dr. Sarah Dalglish, who formerly coordinated the Hulan Community Transit Commission on the future of the world's children, and is now the executive director of the Children in Policies Initiative. And I think we'll give you somewhere 18 months ago, we partnered with CAT 2030 and Catalyst 2030 to set up a community practice connecting organizations supporting young game changers, the youth empowerment. And a question for you, what does well-being mean to you in your work in young game changers?
Thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate the lovely introduction, and I'm so excited to be here on LPTV. As you said, I'm Executive Director of Children in All Policies 2030, or CAP 2030, and we promote children's and adolescents' rights and protect their health through science, advocacy, and coalition building. I'm really excited to speak to our other panelists today and to our audience about our experiences with youth empowerment and well-being. Just as a bit of background, our work started with the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission report. So this was a scientific report with public health scientists and experts on child health from all around the world. And we worked together for years to try to understand what was most important for children's health and well-being, including their mental health, which is a huge issue these days. We talked to these top experts, but we also knew that we had to go to the source and speak to children and young people themselves about their priorities, because otherwise our report wouldn't have much meaning. So we spoke with some disabled adolescents in Nigeria. We spoke with refugee children in Lebanon. We spoke with young people in poor neighborhoods in Argentina. We spoke with indigenous children in New Zealand. And what was really interesting is that despite their very different backgrounds, their priorities were remarkably similar. They all valued school and education. That came out across the board. They also cared about family togetherness, clean environments, safety from violence, and access to culture. So what I thought was really interesting is that these children and young people had the right values. And I think it would be really important, and the whole commission did, to translate these values into policy and into power in policy making. So we started our work at CAP 2030 2 years ago with the goal of implementing the recommendations of this report. And of course, that's just when the magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic was becoming clear. And since then, we've understood how the pandemic has affected young people's health, their schooling, their ability to socialize, all of which are critical for their well-being and their development. And we've seen, as a result, of a major mental health crisis among young people and adolescents. I think it's been really tough for a lot of young people. But even before the pandemic arrived, we already knew that children were facing huge challenges in terms of their well-being. In terms of the World Health Organization, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experiences a mental disorder. So depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders are among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents. That is just the baseline before major threats like COVID and the climate emergency. Of course, the climate crisis poses an existential threat to the future of children and young people, and it's already damaging their health and well-being today. In fact, a recent global survey of 10,000 young people across 10 countries found that almost 60% were extremely worried about climate change, and over 75% stated that because of climate change, the future is frightening. So this is a baseline. We have a climate emergency. We have a mental health crisis that's compounded by COVID. But as Ed said in his introduction, we're here to talk about positive solutions. And there's so much that can be done when we empower children and young people to participate in decision making. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we've learned at CAP 2030 from both a scientific and a practical standpoint about how getting children and young people involved in policy making can make things so much better. The first thing I want to say is that children and young people have a right to participate in decision making in areas of life that affects them. And it's not just me saying that. This right is codified in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is ratified by all countries in the world, unfortunately, except for my own country, the United States. But regardless, it is the world's most widely ratified human rights treaty. So children and young people have a right to participate in decisions that affect them. We also know from research on policy that participatory policymaking, that's when you involve the people who are meant to benefit, and it's not just politicians who make all the decisions. That can improve understanding of the policy problem. It can create greater accountability, legitimacy, and trust, and it can lead to more effective implementation. So it's a good thing to involve the people who are affected, including children, in policymaking processes. Our experiences in several countries have shown that children can meaningfully participate in analyzing policy problems and designing solutions. So let me give you a few examples from our work globally. In Ghana, an art competition was organized for children and young people to provide creative input into national policymaking processes. And it was presented at a conference attended by top policymakers across sectors. In Nepal, adolescents collected data on climate risks, so things like landslides, crop failures, and drought, using open access apps on tablets. And then they analyzed the data for presentation to policymakers. Let me give another example from global level, because policy is also made in international spheres like the United Nations. So right now we're creating a youth advisory board to feed into UN policy frameworks on the topic of harmful marketing to children. Basically the ads you see on your phone and on social media, which can be invasive, steal your data, and try to sell you harmful products. If anyone listening today is interested in getting involved and learning more, you can join our session at noon tomorrow, European time. So these are just a few examples of our work, and I'm sure our other panelists will be able to share even better ones. But one thing I wanted to say is that adults are really starting to listen. In our work with public health scientists, policymakers, and other stakeholders around the world, I do see mentalities changing. It's not automatic. It requires a push from all of us, but adults are starting to understand that we need to work with and listen to children and youth, and that we can't actually do it without their active input and collaboration. So that really gives me hope. I will say we still do have a lot to learn, and that's one of the reasons it was so important for me to be here today, to hear from the young changemakers on this panel and in our audience, and to learn from others who know that children and young people must participate in the decisions that affect them. And that's why I'm so excited to hear from the youth who are such active participants in the Learning Planet Festival and who can really help lead us into the future we all deserve. And I'm proud to be part of this global community that's learning to take care of ourselves, each other, and the planet. So thank you so much to all of you in advance for your creative and collaborative ideas. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Yeah, and indeed, I think your work with CAP and more broadly as well has always placed, this building meaningful partnership across youth networks, youth organizations for policy, for support, for advocacy, for young game changers and for youth health particularly. It's always been at the forefront, and thanks so much for your role and your push towards that too. As said, it's an opportunity in this session this morning to hear from some amazing youth, young game changers, two of which that make up the Learning Planet Youth Fellows community. And so we'll pass on to you next, Raven. Raven, you're a youth leader from the Philippines. You've dedicated much of your short life so far towards supporting and promoting well-being, rights and education in the Philippines, and you're now here as a student studying in Paris. What does well-being mean for you in your work on a day-to-day basis?
Thanks so much, Ed, and also to Sarah for that very insightful intervention. So I'm Raven, I'm 23 years old, and I feel so honored to be one of the speakers in this important conversation about youth empowerment and well-being. So when I was a student in the Philippines, I was leading a nonprofit organization. So on weekends, we went to communities and we were teaching different ages, children, parents, and elderly about topics such as mental health, disaster preparedness, nutrition, among many other things. And I learned so much from this endeavor, which I shared with the young people I met in the Learning Planet Youth Council and also my colleagues in the master I'm taking here at the Learning Planet Institute. I learned a lot about context-based solutions where we don't just implement projects, we assess needs, we curate programs according to these needs, share it, and continue to adapt it to different contexts. And that will make the impact so much more long-term and sustainable. So now I'm in Paris and I'm representing the youth voice in the Strategic Advisory Board of LPI, working on several local and international projects. But today I want to highlight our work in Curriculum for Life. which is a nonprofit organization co-creating an open access educational curriculum that takes into account the wholeness of learners. That, learners are more than their exam scores, their grades, and we should no longer focus on cognitive skills. So yeah, we are co-creating this curriculum with learners, parents, teachers, and thought leaders alike. So to summarize my point, I believe that well-being should be holistic, not just physical, but also mental, like what Sarah highlighted earlier, social, etc. And well-being also means being empowered, being listened to, and that means to empower the youth. They or we should be having a voice on important issues, especially on matters that could affect our future, like education, health, rights, policies on environment, among many other things.
Thanks so much, Raven. Yeah, and I think you have really presented this and proved this in your work. The diversity of the initiatives that you're involved with, I think really pushes and makes that case for how we need to have an integrated look at supporting the well-being of youth, both in terms of our projects, in terms of the education that we are delivering and creating. And I think you really reflect that in your work as well. So thanks so much for sharing that. Tom, over to you. In your work, you again as well have many different hats across well-being, supporting bringing people as well out of poverty as well, supporting girls' education. What does well-being mean and how does it function in your work in Kenya?
Hello, Jambo. It's quite an honor being part of this conversation and also just listening from Sarah and Raven. And also thanks for the nice introduction, Edward. Practically, well-being at a personal level and as an organizational level that I represent is just being able to provide a safe space. And in the process of us providing these safe spaces, then believe that every young person can be able to realize their full potentials. So as we create these safe spaces, we try to ensure that every young person is able to get a skill or a skill set for them to be empowered. And in the process of this, also ensure that we provide them with a platform for them to also go teach or empower other people. So it's more of a ripple effect, sort of a system where as we provide you safe space to be able to get empowered and have mental wellness, we expect you to also go out and share the information that you'll be able to learn to other people so that we can be able to have a better world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. Yeah, and I think this ripple effect seems to be coming up as well, that if we can provide that quality education, if we can provide spaces as well for young people to interact, that then the knock-on effect that can have in terms of well-being and flourishing can be so much more as well. Thanks to each of you for your opening words and interventions. Just for the audience as well, you'll see next to your screen on the webpage of the festival the link towards the Discord channel. If you would like to ask any questions of the panel, make your contribution, you'll see that there is a chat that already in place called Learning to Take Care of Oneself. And so don't hesitate to ask any questions, share your comments, and we'll try to get to them before the end of the session as well. We'll go on though to the next question that we have, which is very much centered around co-construction. So where co-construction comes in to work supporting young people to thrive. And Sarah, the Human Rights Commission report pushes for governments to harness coalitions across sectors, to really push and overcome ecological and commercial pressures and supporting and ensuring children receive their rights and entitlement and have strong well-being. For you in your work, where does co-construction across the board come in to helping young people to thrive?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. I think that's a really critical question. And it's not an easy one. As our report said, we are entering a new phase in human history, really. People have called it the Anthropocene, basically the first era of history where humans are having an impact on the environment. And it just means the challenges that we're facing are incredibly poignant and incredibly different that they have been before. So what we really talked about in our report is that we needed a new model. We need to do something different because what we're doing right now is not working. And that's how we got into the situation that we're in today with climate change. And I think one reason is that the views and perspectives of children and young people have not been taken into account because, as we know, children and young people have been leaders in the fight against climate change. There's no denying that. And so that's where this question of co-construction that you're bringing up is really important because traditionally, adults have made all of the decisions and children have had to follow those decisions. So I think that it's really critical to bring children and young people from the beginning. And we need to change mentalities, hierarchical mentalities about who is allowed to decide and who must obey those decisions. So I think that is really absolutely critical, not only to supporting young people to thrive, which is, of course, so important. It's really the purpose of our work. And it's at the heart of this festival, but it's also about all of us having a better world together. Because as I said, one thing that really touched me from the work that we did together. As I said, we were with these top scientists at the World Health Organization and at academic institutions all over the world. But when we talked to children and young people themselves, their priorities were so the right ones. What's more important than family, than education, clean environments, safety, culture? Those are really the most important things to any human society. And that's what children and young people talked about. So I think when it comes to co-construction, there's different ways to bring people together into the process, to bring children and young people. I can talk a bit more about that. But what I would say is that you really it has to start at the beginning. It can't be superficial where adults make a decision and then they just ask young people to approve it. It has to start earlier. And I think that that's why the term co-construction is a really good one, because it shows that we're really creating something together from the beginning.
Thanks so much. Sarah, maybe you could share a little bit. You mentioned around the advisory council that you're looking to set up. What's kind of been the rationale around bringing together a council of youth consultants, if we would say that, into the initiative?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I have to say we've gotten a lot of inspiration from LearningPlanet and from your work with just talented and brilliant young people all around the world. So I think that looking at different ways of co-constructing policy and other initiatives, we thought one great way would be to work in a close fashion with children and young people who are specifically passionate about the issue that we're working on. I mentioned harmful commercial marketing. It might seem, I think, like sort of a specific issue, but my guess is that the young people that we work with are already very familiar with it, the young people that are listening today. Because if you have a telephone, I see Raven nodding her head, you know that you see all kinds of ads constantly. And those are targeted ads. There's an estimate by the time a child reaches the age of 13, they have over 70 million data points collected on them by marketers around the world. So commercial marketers are really, these are big, profitable companies. They make a lot of money off of targeting young people with ads for things that can really harm their health. But you weren't asking about commercial marketing. You were asking about the advisory council. Basically, I think that children and young people are the experts here. And so when you talk about where some of these policies and decisions are made, whether it's at the United Nations, in assemblies that take place in Geneva or New York, or whether it's in the capital cities by national governments, children and young people are not in those spaces. And yet they're the experts on the topic. And so our idea was bringing together a group of children and young people who are going to be able to advise every step of the way as we get started on this international process. So I think that that's going to be a really great way to get input. One thing I will say that I think it's important to consider is that not all children and young people are able to participate in an advisory council. Some of them, most of our work is in English, like we're speaking English today, but not all children speak English. Not all children have a phone, or not all children have access to internet. Some children, unfortunately, are working and they don't have time to participate in these processes. They might live in a rural area. They might have caring duties. They might be disabled and not be able to participate in a meeting because they might have a disability that prevents that. So all of those children and young people, their views are equally as important. So I think it's important to say that when you have an advisory board that can provide really critical input from engaged, intelligent young people, but it's also important to look to other ways, whether that is having discussion groups or whether it is reaching out on social media or through schools. So it's making sure that we have an inclusive group of young people and not just those who are sort of most able to participate is also important.
Thanks so much, Shara. And I'm glad actually that you did mention this, the harmful commercial marketing group as well, because I think that's something that I've gathered as well from CAP Initiative as well, is not being afraid to focus on quite specific core topics and trusting that there's real expertise and insight there, and that not everything needs to be catch-all, but that we can get into the heart of issues and that there really is the expertise there as well, while knowing that, and I think we can hear a bit more about this now, that there have to be lots of ways in which we can provide space as well to bring in the thoughts and the views of those that might not have access to these conversations on a regular basis. So I fully agree with that. Raven, maybe for you, you spent a year as well in the Youth Council of LearningPlanet, but also in many different kind of collaborative initiatives as well, and that's really at the heart of your work. Where is co-constructing coming in for you on a day-to-day basis when you're looking at youth well-being and empowerment?
And I agree with Sarah so much about the importance of treating children as experts, especially on matters that will mainly affect their generation, our generation, and making more inclusive youth spaces. So when we say things such as youth needs to be empowered, climate justice should involve young people, youth needs mental health care, the next question that we should be asking is, how do we do it? So it's important to involve them in important conversations where decisions are being made, involve them in processes of designing things that would affect them, such as programs, curriculum, policies, etc. So involve them in every step of the way. So last month, I attended the World Futures Day conference. And one thing that I heard and has never left my mind once I heard it was this fellow youth leader from Singapore saying, young people are not seat warmers. So we shouldn't just let them speak. We should listen to them and work together with them, with us. So as much as I believe in creating platforms for youth to be at the center, I believe it's also necessary that more concretely, we do something about what we young people are speaking about. So to me, this is co-construction, involving young people in every step of the way.
Thanks so much, Raven. Yeah, and that quote certainly sticks with me too as well. It resonates with what Melati mentioned, I think, in the last talk just now, that Pearl put on our Discord channel, that kids are 25% of the world's population, but also 100% of the world's future. And I think changing this point of view around, there's a space and a seat for everyone at the table, every youth at the table to come in and provide some real genuine expertise and contribute to these discussions very early on, as you said, Sarah, too. Tom, for you, because your work is reaching many different levels and is really looking at, some kind of critical disadvantaged areas and dealing fundamentally around poverty, child poverty as well. Where does co-construction and collaboration fit into how you're trying to work with the Ginger Angel organization, as well as in your other kind of collaborative initiatives? I think, unfortunately, we can't get Tom at the moment. There are a couple of connection issues, but we will certainly come back to you, Tom, as well. And it did work earlier, so we did get many of your points. And I will keep that question on pause for yourself, Tom. And it can feed, though, into a couple more kind of closing questions as well. And this is looking forward to the year ahead, 2023. Raven, Sarah, what does 2023 look like? What do you want to see in 2023 for youth empowerment and well-being in your work, and in more broadly commitments from other organizations supporting youth as well? Sarah, maybe we start with you first.
Sure, thank you so much. And I hope we'll be able to hear from Tom too, because I think he really has a lot of valuable perspective to share. So I think 2023, big dreams, and I think they're shared by others on this panel. I think for me, what I would like to see is for the power of the youths to continue to increase. I think we're on the right trajectory, and for adults to continue to learn. As I said, I have really seen a change in my recent years of work that adults are starting to understand that children need to be heard, as Raven said. And that they're not seat warmers. They have something to say, but they need to be heard. I think what I would like to see is that there is what might be thought of as a continuum of youth empowerment and of youth involvement in policymaking, because as I said, we're particularly interested in policymaking. We're called Children in All Policies. And on one end of the continuum, you have children just being informed of what's going on. They, get to learn about what policymakers are doing, whether it's by radio or websites or newspapers, things like that, maybe an open house, and they get informed. But that's really not enough, as we know. Children a little bit further along the spectrum, they can be consulted, where they're actually asked what they think, maybe in a focus group, maybe through schools, something like that. A little bit further along the spectrum is where children are a continual and visible part of the policy process. That means instead of just being consulted once, they actually help. They might be part of an advisory board, as we've discussed. They might be part of defining the problem that policies are trying to solve, data collection. They might help write reports or review reports so that they're really a full part of the process. what I would like to see in 2023 is if we move all the way to the end of the spectrum where children and young people are empowered to create change. And that goes beyond mere consultation where they're just asked. It means that children and young people initiate policy processes. They initiate information campaigns. It means they're actually delegated and allowed to make decisions. They can actually manage programs and research. They can do so much. This entire festival is a testament to that. So what I would like to see in 2023 and what I hope we can help drive and everyone else who is participating in this festival can participate in is moving from just mere information, informing children, consulting them to true empowerment, where not only are they a part of the process, but they're also help driving it.
Thanks so much, Dara. Yeah, and I might come back to you in a second with the question around any examples that have inspired you so far about getting to that stage of not just consulting, but where youth have really been involved from a policy process from the very beginning. But I'll give you a chance to have a think on that one and go first to Raven. You're a student, you're a consultant, you're a leader, all at once in 2023. There's going to be lots of things happening for you. What would you like to see in projects, in your projects, and more broadly, global projects as well for youth well-being in 2023?
Okay, so in 2023, as Sarah said, big dreams, and the success of youth empowerment and well-being to me would mean bridging the gaps in countries, in regions, generations, disciplines, etc. So for example, mental health, it's a personal problem. It's also a community problem. And at the same time, we should recognize that it's a global problem. And therefore, the programs, policies, and solutions should also work the same way. So if we are able to look at well-being and youth empowerment as a personal matter, and then more broadly in a global scale, that is, I believe, one step towards success. So yeah, the key word for 2023 for me is international, intergenerational, interdisciplinary. And I think the festival is a great way to start that goal. And yeah, the solution that we create should be encompassing and inclusive, and at the same time, it could be localized and adapted to what communities and individuals need.
Thanks so much. And I think this really connects to the previous question around strategies and processes for co-constructing. And we can be ambitious in this around, thinking truly at this inter and intra level as well. Sarah, yeah, I mean, are there some examples that are inspiring you at the moment of what you're speaking about, bringing youth in at the beginning of these processes to make real change?
Yes, there are some examples. The truth is there aren't enough. We need more. But I thought I would bring up just two examples that I think of are like proof of principle that show that this can be done. And we're talking mainly with young people today. But I wanted to stress that adolescents, people under the age of 18, and even very young children can participate. So we're not just talking about old timers like Raven here, but even very young children can be involved. It's really about involving all people, no matter their age, in policy processes. So the first example is in the city of Melbourne in Australia. Which was looking to do some city planning, and they wanted to get the impact of, the input of children in town planning. So there were consultations with children aged 3 to 12, so fairly young people, about what made the city of Melbourne a good place to live. Those children participated in schools and libraries and preschools. They submitted stories and photos and drawings, and children under age 3, their input was gotten from caregivers who took a walking tour of the city to see what was the city like from a small child's perspective. And there are a number of policy changes that were made following this consultation. For example, about the timing of crossing lights, traffic crossings, so that children and other people who needed time to safely cross the street had that time. So that's an example of very young children making meaningful and positive changes to city planning. Another example I would like to share is from Bangladesh. And this issue has to do with child marriages. Child marriage was actually already illegal in Bangladesh, so that law existed, but it was not enforced. And so there was a group of young child activists, about 36 of them, who worked together to stop child marriages in their communities. So how did they do that? They set up child forums that included young girls whose marriages had been stopped. They developed relationships with local leaders, such as the mayor and police. They also worked with social media and journalists to raise the profile of this issue. And working with these local leaders and police, they visited families who they knew were in the process of arranging child marriages. And they were able to stop over 72 child marriages from proceeding. So that's incredibly powerful. That is life-changing for those children and young people. The children and young people whose marriages were stopped, but also the power that those 36 activists were able to express. I mean, it's incredible. So I think that children and young people have a power that they are able to harness in some cases. And even when adults resist, they can exercise that power. So I think those are two examples that come to mind that I think are really, really show a lot about how when children and young people are empowered, what kind of positive changes can be made in their own lives, but also in the community.
Thanks so much for those examples as well, which I guess are both instances where taking a very specific, concrete issue that is really affecting the day-to-day, bringing youth into the process, and then seeing as well the impact, the knock-on, I think the cascading effect you mentioned as well, Tom, earlier. You know, if you can really tackle and bring youth into a specific issue, as you said as well, Sarah, with commercial marketing too, the potential then to build agency, build solutions that can then fundamentally support and build well-being as well, really comes through. And on that note, I believe we're now back, Tom, with you. Thanks to your adaptability as well with the internet too. Just going back to you, maybe we close with your hopes for 2023 in your work around supporting and fostering and building youth well-being.
Thank you, and sorry for the internet glitch and also the glitchiness, but yeah, I'm back. So my hope for 2023 is the same way we did our 2022, where we had community involvement. My hope this year is being that we're able to do a quick assessment and also just get the opinion of our community members on what do they really want for this year, is for us as an organization, through partnership with many more people, to just bring in the aspect of community service and make it more fun. And as we make it fun, we also try to ensure that we have like a concrete strategic plan. And one thing that probably I've been able to gain from Dr. Sarah is the involvement of children and young people, because in most situations, I think we have been involving adults to be able to help us influence our programs. But I see the sense of also trying to bring in young people and young children into the conversation, and also just ensure their voice count. So yeah, that's my plan for 2023.
Thanks, Tom. And I think you shared before that you've been looking at different forms of media as well to gather and to really advocate for this. Maybe you could just share a bit about what you've been doing around your podcasts with the organization and in local media as well.
Yeah, so one thing that we as an organization, we appreciate is partnership. And we tried to look at a way in which we can be able to reach more young people. So we opted to use 3 platforms, and that's Twitter, that's also using the podcast, and also going directly to media houses. And as we go to media houses, we go under our theme. We have community-based television that we do document about what young people are doing, and also share with the, how do I call it, the major news outlets that we have in Kenya. So in regards to probably our Twitter spaces and our podcast, we try to have conversations that really matter to young people, and try to make these conversations an easy conversation, not a stiff conversation where someone feels afraid, or someone feels that probably the people who are in this conversation are not my age mates, and probably they can't be able to relate into the issues that I'm facing. So we try to make our conversations more youth-friendly, and try to ensure that we also involve youth speakers in our conversations. The reason why we opted for podcast is because we realized that we used to do Zoom conversations and also Google Meet conversations, but we had limitations of recordings, right? So we opted that why can't we do something that even though we are done with the conversation, other young people can also be in a position to come listen in. And also we realized that most young people that we work with prefer listening to music. And if we're able to make or construct a podcast that really aligns to their goal, then they will be also in a position to get time and listen to what we have to share through our podcast. Yeah, so those are the 2 tips or 3 that we are currently working on.
Thanks so much, Tom. I think we'll close off there on that call for conversations, for construction, pushing forward this ripple effect as well, through really getting and targeting and bringing youth in from a very early basis into some real challenges in their local area and further afield. Thanks so much to Sarah as well for your examples, to Raven for your experiences, to Tom as well for your enthusiasm and reactivity and adaptability with the internet connection as well. Really looking forward to continuing the conversations over the course of LPTV today and across the whole week of the festival. We'll pass it back now to Kristen for the next step.
Celian, I'm sorry, try again.
Okay, I said he's going to watch you on the TV.
Okay.
And so he said...
Thanks to Ed and his guests for that great discussion on youth empowerment and well-being. And thanks to all of you for participating in our survey. We asked you, how do you act on the issues you care most about? Is it by protesting in public, creating art and content, getting involved in politics, or by becoming active in your local community? I have the results here right now. Currently, 9% of you are interested in getting involved in politics. 23% like to get out onto the street, public protests. 42% of you are out there creating arts, music, and video, hopefully inspired by Nusrat and some of our other guests. But it's an overwhelming 84% of you that are active in your local community. That's fantastic and something we're very much dedicated to here at LPTV. Now, I'm joined in the LPTV studio by the founder and CEO of KIDsforSDGs and the Global Citizen Capital, Kenneth Kwok. Welcome to LPTV, Kenneth. I know that you're an impact investor, that you build and fund communities around finance for social impact, and that at last year's festival, you organized a huge hackathon that took place in Hong Kong. Can you tell us what it is that you've created and organized as part of this 2023 festival and the events you have coming up this week?
Well, thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, wishing everyone a happy Lunar New Year of the Rabbit. Collective peace, partnership, prosperity, and positivity for oneself, others, and the planet. Now, great question. Thank you so much. If I may, just take a step back, right? This is my first time in Paris since 2020, right? A lot has happened in the last 3 years. And frankly, a million thanks to LearningPlanet for even having me to present KIDsforSDGs and Global Citizen Capital. So yes, we love innovation. In fact, Kids for SDGs and Global Citizen Capital work together to create the ACE concept, ACE. First, we have to activate. Now, a lot of people will think we have to advocate, but I think we are past that point. We need to take advocacy and turn it and activate into action. And how does that work? We have to ideate, we have to innovate. Then we have to cultivate. Cultivating is about bringing community, resources, and frankly, minds together to tackle the world's greatest challenges. And last but not least, we have to elevate by capital, frankly, a multi-capital approach. And that's where Global Citizen Capital supports Kids for SDGs as a brother and sister organization. Last year, we did a great hackathon. We had 78 teams joining us to, advocate for peace, for planet, for prosperity. This year, we have Aspire 2030, which is a larger global edition of this hackathon. But next to this hackathon as well, it's not just competition. It's also bringing 55 countries worth of youth and ambitions and mindsets together. Last week, we were in Davos, where the new Global Risk Report for 2023 were announced. If everyone took a look at this report, in the next 10 years, 5 of the 10 biggest obstacles we face are environmental driven. So through this year at LearningPlanet and frankly all our partnerships with the NGOs and supporting organizations of LearningPlanet Festival, we really, really hope to drive forward that environmental change. And look, thank you so much for having us, and we cannot wait to scale more impact on a collective basis.
Kenneth, thanks so much for sharing with us everything that you're doing. And you can find out more about these events and all the other events over the coming days on our festival website, via our Discord server, and of course on our social media. Now, Edward Stevenette has just jumped into the studio to join us now and to tell us how, as a young person, you can get involved, how you can become a LearningPlanet Youth Fellow. Ed, welcome. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. I should just say it's a pleasure to meet Kenneth in person for the first time. We've been collaborating for 2 years, supporting the youth community at LearningPlanet across with so many organizations online through the pandemic. And it's such a pleasure to be able to actually meet you in the flesh and to be able to share a bit more around what we're doing with Youth Fellows. So Youth Fellows, as Kristen shared a bit more earlier, are amazing game changers around the world. And our community just connects them, builds meaningful ways of working together and building community. In order to apply and join, you just have to be under 26 years old. And you have to be just coming with a project, an idea, and some kind of impact that you want to make to support fellow young game changers as well. And so we are opening and welcoming applications from around the world. We already have 200 incredible young game changers who have joined this community, many of which who are speaking today. We've just had Tom and Raven share as well, who are absolutely amazing in our session just now. And we'll be having many more over the course of the week. And just the last thing I'd like to say is, if you would like to get an idea of what they're participating in, if you go to the blog of the festival, you'll be able to see an article on celebrating the work of young game changers, which lists all of the events that Youth Fellows are taking part in over the course of the week and are organising as part of the festival. So huge thanks to them all, and great to be able to share more.
Thanks so much to you both. Thanks to Kenneth. Thanks to Ed, and for sharing this information, for telling us about everything that you're doing during the festival, and for telling us how you can get involved with the LearningPlanet Youth Fellows program, which is running throughout the year. If you know someone who would feel empowered by watching any of our programs here on LPTV, or if you want to replay anything you're seeing, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, because all of the videos will be available to watch for free and for you to share with your friends. There are plenty more events dedicated to youth empowerment happening in the coming days at the festival, like the Ubuntu Learning Circle, where you can hear from African youth that are reinventing the future. That's on Friday the 27th from 10 a.m. to 12 Central European Time. Check out the festival website for more details on this session and everything else happening in the days to come.